I didn't argue. I didn't beg. When my brother called me on a Tuesday afternoon, laughing as he told me he was taking my studio and converting it into a co-working space, I said 2 words. Okay. Sure. He paused. I think he expected me to cry. He always expected me to cry. I didn't, because by the time he made that call, I had already spoken to my attorney. I had already filed the paperwork. I had already set everything into motion. My brother thought he was delivering a killing blow. He had no idea he was walking straight into a room I had built specifically for him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because none of this makes sense without the years that came before it. I'm the younger of 2. My brother is 4 years older than me, and from the moment I was old enough to notice, I understood that our parents had a favorite. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't one of those situations where the favoritism is so quiet you start to wonder if you imagined it. This was loud. This was obvious. This was my brother getting a car for his 16th birthday and me getting a card with $20 inside it. This was my parents telling me to figure it out when my college acceptance letters came in, while they co-signed every loan, every lease, every business venture my brother ever dreamed up, none of which lasted more than 18 months. I figured it out. I waitressed through college. I took on freelance work. I graduated with a degree in fine arts and a minor in business administration, and I built something real with both of them. Ceramics. That was my thing. Has been since I was 11 years old, and my grandmother put a lump of clay in my hands and said, "Make something." I made a lopsided bowl that couldn't hold water. She kept it on her mantle for the rest of her life. My grandmother passed away 3 years ago and left me her house. Not my parents. Not my brother. Me. I was the one who visited every Sunday. I was the one who drove her to her appointments when her eyesight got too bad to drive. I was the one who sat with her during the final months, holding her hand, listening to her stories. She knew what she was doing when she updated that will. The house was a 1920s Victorian in a small but growing neighborhood, the kind of neighborhood that had recently been designated a historic preservation district by the city. 2 stories, original hardwood floors, crown molding that had survived a century intact, and a back room with north-facing windows that my grandmother had always called the light room because the light in there was different from the rest of the house. Softer, steadier, perfect for a studio. I spent 14 months and every dollar I had converting it. Not tearing it apart, converting it. I worked with a preservation contractor, pulled every permit the city required, documented every single modification. I installed proper ventilation for the kiln. I reinforced the floors. I restored the original tile in the entryway instead of replacing it. When the city's historic preservation office did their walkthrough, the inspector told me it was one of the most thoughtful conversions he had reviewed in the district. I named it Hearth Studio. It wasn't just a workspace. It was a teaching space. I ran weekend workshops for adults and after-school sessions for kids. I had a small gallery up front where I sold my own work and featured local artists. I had a wait list for my beginner's wheel-throwing class that stretched 4 months out. I also had an apprentice, a 22-year-old named Lily, who had walked in off the street 2 years ago asking if I needed help, and who turned out to be one of the most talented people I had ever watched work with clay. She handled the workshop scheduling, managed the gallery inventory, and had her own small line of pieces she sold through the studio. She was meticulous, kind, and fiercely loyal, in the way that only people who have been underestimated their entire lives can be. Life was not perfect, but it was mine. Completely, entirely, undeniably mine. My brother had watched all of this from a distance and decided it looked like opportunity. His name is not important. In this story, he is simply my brother, and that is enough. What you need to know about him is this. He was 33 years old, had started and shuttered 4 businesses in 7 years, still borrowed money from our parents regularly, and had recently become obsessed with the idea of opening a premium co-working and creative hub after reading one too many articles about the rise of hybrid work culture. He had a pitch deck. He had a logo. He had a vision board, apparently. What he did not have was a building. The first time he mentioned my studio, I thought it was a joke. We were at my parents' house for Easter, and he said, almost casually, "You know, that place of yours would be perfect for what I'm building. The bones are incredible. All it needs is an open floor plan and better Wi-Fi." I laughed. I thought he was being obnoxious in the way he sometimes was throwing out big ideas with no intention behind them, just to watch people react. I changed the subject. The second time, 2 months later, he called me directly. He said he had been thinking about it seriously. He said the neighborhood was exploding, and my location was prime real estate. He said I was underutilizing the asset. He offered to buy me out for what he called a fair number, which turned out to be 60% of what the property had appraised for, with no acknowledgement of the 14 months of labor and permits and restoration I had poured into it. I told him the studio was not for sale. Not to him. Not to anyone. He said, "I figured you'd say that. We'll talk again soon." I should have been more alarmed by how calm he was when he said it. The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday in October. I was in the studio, trimming a batch of mugs, when my phone rang. It was my brother. I almost didn't pick up. When I did, he was laughing. Not meanly, almost warmly, which was somehow worse. He said, "Hey, so I wanted to let you know. I talked to Mom and Dad, and we've worked something out. I'm going to be taking over the studio space starting in 60 days. I've already got a contractor lined up. We're gutting the back room, opening up the floor plan, putting in a proper commercial reception desk up front. The gallery wall is coming down. The kilns obviously have to go, can't have that liability in a co-working space. I've got a designer coming to look at it Thursday." I sat very still. I had a trimming tool in my hand and a half-finished mug on the wheel in front of me, and I went completely still. "You're not on the deed," I said. "No," he said. "But Mom and Dad are willing to contest the will. Grandma wasn't exactly sharp in her final years, and a judge might find that interesting. It would be messy and expensive for you. Or you could just let me do this and I'll give you the 60% we talked about. You can find a smaller space somewhere." And there it was. That was the move. Not strength. Leverage. He was going to use my love for my grandmother's memory, my unwillingness to drag her name through a legal fight, as a weapon against me. "That's a lot," I said. "Let me think about it." "Sure," he said, and he was still smiling, I could hear it. "But I've already booked the contractor for next week to do the walkthrough, just so you know." I hung up, and I sat in the quiet of my studio for a long moment. Then I called my attorney. Her name was Claire, and I had hired her 18 months earlier to handle the deed transfer and some business contracts for the studio. She was sharp, unhurried, and she had a way of listening that made you feel like she had already anticipated everything you were about to say. I told her everything. The offer, the threat, the timeline. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He walked onto a historic preservation property and told you he's planning to gut the interior and remove the original architectural elements. Without permits. Without city approval." "Yes," I said. "And he's bringing a contractor in for a walkthrough next week." "Yes." She was quiet again. When she spoke, her voice had a particular quality to it, calm, precise, almost gentle. "I need you to do something for me. I need you not to fight him yet. I need you to let him come in." I didn't understand. "I said so," she explained. "See, the house was in a historic preservation district. That meant any structural modification, removing walls, altering original woodwork, changing the facade, required specific permits from the city's Historic Preservation Commission. These were not fast permits. They were not easy permits. In some cases, they were impossible permits, because the whole point was to protect the character of the district. A contractor walking in and gutting a 1920s Victorian interior would be a historic preservation violation, a serious one, with significant fines, mandatory restoration requirements, and in some cases, criminal liability for the property owner of record. My brother was not the property owner of record. I was. But here was Claire's thinking. If I fought him now, he would accelerate the will contest. It would take months, cost tens of thousands of dollars, drag my grandmother's name into a courtroom. Even if I won, it would be ugly and expensive. And my brother knew that. However, if he actually proceeded with his plan, brought in contractors, began demolition without permits, removed original architectural elements, he would be violating city ordinances. He would be the one facing fines and mandatory restoration orders. He would be the one who had created the mess. "What I want you to do," Claire said, "is let him think he has won. We are going to draw up a temporary occupancy agreement. I am going to word it very carefully. It will look like a concession. It will give him exactly what he thinks he wants, access to the space. What he won't notice, because he won't read it carefully enough, is the clause that makes him personally liable for any modifications made to the property during the occupancy period, including any violations of city preservation codes." I said, "He won't read it carefully. Does he ever?" She said, "He didn't. That was the thing about my brother. He was charming and quick and he skimmed everything. He had spent his whole life having other people handle the fine print, our parents, mostly. He trusted his instincts and his personality, and he had been bailed out enough times that he had stopped believing consequences were real. "I need you to trust me," Claire said, "and I need you not to be there when it happens. Can you plan to be somewhere else for a few weeks?" I thought about it. I had a ceramics residency I had been invited to in Asheville that I had been putting off. 2 weeks in the mountains, working in a communal studio, teaching a workshop. "I have somewhere I can go," I said. "Good," Claire said. "Go there. Let him work. Don't check the cameras obsessively. Check them once a day, and only to document. Don't call him. Don't confront him. Let the city do that for you." I signed the agreement. I handed my brother the keys, his expression, when I called and said, "Okay. I've thought about it." "Come get them" was something I will not forget. It was not triumphant. It was almost disappointed, like he had been looking forward to the fight. I drove to Asheville. I told Lily everything. She was the only person who knew the full plan, and she handled it with the same quiet steadiness she brought to everything. She documented everything on the cameras I had installed when I first opened good, high-resolution cameras that covered every corner of the studio. She sent me clips each evening. She was calm. She was methodical. She was my person on the ground. What happened over the next 3 weeks was almost difficult to watch. My brother moved fast. His contractor arrived the day after he got the keys. They walked through every room. I watched on the camera feed as my brother pointed at the wall between the gallery and the workshop and said something I couldn't hear. And the contractor nodded and started measuring. They pulled up a corner of the original tile in the entryway just to see what was underneath. According to the message my brother sent me that I did not respond to, they removed the shelving I had built in the back room and stacked it in the alley. Then they started on the walls. The wall between the front gallery and the workshop space was an original 1920s partition wall, not load-bearing, but original to the structure and protected under the historic preservation designation. They took it down in 2 days. I watched it happen on the camera feed from my studio in Asheville, sitting on a wooden stool with a cup of coffee going cold in my hand. Lily texted me, "You okay?" I texted back, "Keep documenting." My brother also removed the original crown molding from the main room. It had apparently interfered with the track lighting he wanted to install. He sent me a photo of the new lighting with the message "Looks so much better." I looked at the photo for a long time. The room looked like a tech office. It looked like nothing. It looked like every generic workspace I had ever walked past and felt nothing about. I didn't respond. What my brother did not do, at any point, was apply for a single permit with the Historic Preservation Commission. Not for the wall removal, not for the crown molding, not for the structural modification he made to the back doorway to accommodate a wider entrance. Nothing. Claire had anticipated this. She told me before I left. Men like your brother believe that rules are for people who don't have the right connections or the right confidence. He'll assume he can fix it after the fact if anyone notices. They always do. She was right. He assumed he could fix it after the fact. He couldn't. My brother's grand opening was scheduled for a Saturday in mid-November. He called it a soft launch in the invitation, which he sent to everyone he knew, investors he was courting, potential members, local press, our parents. He had a graphic designer do a whole brand identity. He had hired a professional photographer. He had planned a catered event with sparkling wine and a presentation about his vision for the space. I found out about the event from Lily, who had been invited as a community member. My brother thought it was a nice touch, inviting the girl who used to work there, showing everyone how gracious he was. He didn't know that Lily had forwarded me the invitation the moment she received it, and that I had forwarded it directly to Claire. Claire forwarded it to someone else. I drove back from Asheville the Friday before the event. I did not go to the studio. I went to my apartment, unpacked, and called Claire for the final briefing. The Historic Preservation Commission received the complaint 3 weeks ago, with documentation, she said. They have been conducting their review. The inspector is planning to attend the event. Attend, I said. Not raid. Not raid, she said. Attend. Walk in as a member of the public. Do a visual assessment. If what you've documented is accurate, and it is, he will issue a stop work order and a notice of violation on the spot, at a public event. In front of everyone your brother invited to impress, I said. And the agreement? The agreement is airtight, she said. He is the occupying party. He authorized and oversaw every modification. The liability clause is clear, explicit, and he signed it without requesting a single revision. She paused. I also spoke to your parents' attorney. I went very still. Your brother asked your parents to co-sign as financial guarantors for his first 6 months of operational costs, Claire said. Standard for someone without business credit. They put up their home as collateral. I closed my eyes. They signed that 2 weeks ago, she said. If he's fined for the violations, and he will be, and if the mandatory restoration order comes through, and it will, the costs will be substantial. He won't be able to cover them. The guarantors will be contacted. I didn't say anything for a moment. I didn't ask you to do that, I said finally. No, Claire said. But they enabled it. They threatened your inheritance. They co-signed a plan that was built on taking something that legally, ethically, and morally belongs to you. Consequences have a way of connecting. I thought about my mother, who had looked at me across the Easter table and said nothing when my brother floated his idea. I thought about my father, who had called me 2 weeks after the agreement was signed, to say, in a careful voice, I hope you're not too upset about all this. Your brother really has a good vision. I thought about the $20 in the birthday card when I was 16. Okay, I said. Okay. I did not go to the event. Claire had advised against it, and she was right. My presence would have made it about me and my brother, about family drama, about sides. Instead, I sat in my apartment with Lily, who had her phone in her hand and her camera app open. She had arrived early enough to get a spot near the back. She sent me photos as the room filled up. My brother was in a gray blazer, working the room the way he always did. Easy, warm, full of eye contact, and laughing too loud. My parents were there. I could see my mother in a coral blouse near the window. Lily texted. He's about to start the presentation. My brother had a projector. He had a slideshow. He talked about the vision for the space, the community he was building, the creative renaissance happening in the neighborhood. He talked about the building's bones. He said something, according to Lily's text summary, about honoring the original character of the space while evolving it for modern use. I read that one twice. Lily texted. Someone just walked in. Older guy, clipboard, city badge on his lanyard. I stood up from my couch. I sat back down. He's looking at the ceiling molding. Or where it used to be. Then, he's taking photos. Then, several minutes later, he's asking my brother something. My brother is smiling. He's answering. Then, he stopped smiling. The inspector's name was David Reyes, and he had been with the city's Historic Preservation Commission for 11 years. He was thorough. He was unhurried. He made his way through the space during my brother's networking hour with a clipboard and a camera, and he documented 18 specific violations. Removal of original partition wall, removal of original crown molding, unauthorized alteration of a doorway, installation of track lighting requiring modification to original ceiling substrate, and several others. He issued the stop work order and the notice of violation at 7:43 in the evening, in the middle of a room full of investors and press and my parents, by handing my brother a folded document and saying, in a voice that was not unkind but was absolutely clear, "Sir, I need to inform you that this property is in violation of city historic preservation ordinances. This space cannot be operated commercially until the violations are assessed and remediation is ordered. You'll find the details in the notice." Lily sent me a voice memo. She held her phone low and didn't narrate. I could hear the room, the murmur that went through it, my brother's voice saying something sharp and high, and then my mother, clearly, saying his name. Then there was a pause, and Lily texted, "He told the inspector it's your fault, said you set this up. Inspector asked to see documentation of who authorized the modifications. Then, your brother showed him the agreement. Then, I think he just realized." I looked at my phone for a long time after that. I thought about my grandmother's house. I thought about the 14 months I had spent making it into something. I thought about the tile in the entryway that they had pried up to see what was underneath, and the crown molding that had survived 100 years before my brother decided it interfered with his aesthetic. I thought about Lily, standing in the back of that room with her phone held low, steady and loyal as she had been from the beginning. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that. There is a version of this story where the protagonist celebrates, where the justice feels clean and bright. What I actually felt, sitting in my apartment with the voice memo playing again, was something quieter. Something like the specific tiredness of a person who has spent years being underestimated by the people who were supposed to believe in them most, and who finally stopped needing their approval. The restoration order came through 3 weeks later. The city's Historic Preservation Commission required the complete restoration of all modified architectural elements to their original state. The wall, the crown molding, the doorway, the ceiling substrates. The estimated cost was significant. My brother, who had not yet secured a single paying member for his co-working space, could not cover it. The financial guarantors were contacted. My parents lost a substantial portion of their home equity line. Not the house itself, I want to be precise about this, but the line of credit they had put up as collateral was called in, and the amount they had to liquidate was not small. My father called me. He was not angry. He was very quiet, and I think for the first time in a long time he was actually talking to me rather than around me. He said, "Did you know this would happen?" I said, "I knew what the law was. I knew what he was planning to do. I made sure I was protected." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "We should have protected you." I didn't have an answer to that. I said I had to go. I didn't hang up angry. I just hung up, and I sat with it. My brother called once. I let it go to voicemail. In the message, he was not contrite, he was indignant, cycling through accusations and justifications in a way that was so familiar it almost made me tired. He said I had set a trap. He said it wasn't fair. He said he would have made something great of the space. I didn't return the call. I'm not sure I will. Claire filed the paperwork to formally terminate the occupancy agreement based on the violations, and the space was returned to me within the month. I walked in for the first time since I had handed over the keys, and I stood in the doorway of what had been my front gallery. The wall was gone. The molding was gone. The lighting was wrong, and the floors had been scuffed by contractor equipment, and the corner where I had always kept my grandmother's original ceramic bowls on a low shelf was empty. The shelf itself, somewhere in a pile in the alley, that had since been hauled away. I stood there for a while. Then I pulled out my phone and called Lily. "When can you come in?" I said. She said, "I'm already here." She was, in fact, already there standing behind me, because she had followed my car and had been waiting on the porch. I turned around and she was holding 2 coffees from the place down the street, and she handed me one without saying anything, and we stood together in the wreck of my studio and drank our coffees. "We're going to have to redo the restoration documentation," I said. "I already started a folder," she said. "The wall is going to cost a lot to put back. I called a contractor yesterday. The same preservation contractor you used originally. She's already reviewed the city order, and she says the original profile of the molding is documented in the permit file, so it can be replicated." I looked at Lily for a moment. She was 22 years old, and she was already better at this than most people twice her age. "The insurance claim should cover a significant portion," she added. "I pulled the policy last night." The violations and mandatory restoration qualify as covered damage under the Property Protection Clause. Claire confirmed it this morning. I said, "When did you talk to Claire?" "She called me," Lily said. "She wanted to make sure we had everything we needed to move forward. The restoration took 4 months. The preservation contractor was meticulous and good, and she matched the molding profile so precisely that when it was finished, I stood in the main room, and it looked exactly as it had before. The light catching the plaster detail the way it always had. The proportions of the room settling back into themselves like a long exhale. We reopened on a Saturday in late spring. Not a soft launch. Not an investor event. A community open day free workshop demonstrations. Pottery wheel time for kids. Gallery wall hung with new work from 6 local artists, including 3 pieces Lily had made during the closure that stopped every single person who came through the door. I put a small ceramic piece on the shelf in the corner where my grandmother's bowls had always been. I had made it during my residency in Asheville lopsided. Actually, in a deliberate way. The walls intentionally uneven. The glaze, a deep blue-green that shifted in different light. It wasn't my best work technically, but I had made it in the weeks when everything was at its most uncertain, and it had come out exactly the way I wanted. The opening was full. The neighborhood had missed us. People I didn't know came in because they had walked past the space for months and been sad to see it dark. At the end of the day, after everyone had gone, Lily and I sat on the back step with the door open and the kiln warming up for the first time since I had returned. The smell of clay and heat and old wood. The sound of the neighborhood settling into evening. "So," Lily said. "So," I said. "What's next?" I thought about it. I thought about the waitlist that had never fully dissolved. The messages from students asking when classes would resume. The gallery inquiries that had stacked up in my email. I thought about the expansion I had been sketching in my notebook for 2 years. A second kiln room. A dedicated space for youth workshops. A residency program for local artists. I thought about my brother, wherever he was working on his next idea. I thought about my parents. Quieter now, more careful. I thought about my grandmother's bowl, which I had found, miraculously, in the alley pile when the contractor was cleaning up, scratched on one side but intact, still capable of holding things. "The expansion," I said. "We're doing the expansion." Lily smiled. It was the particular smile of someone who had been waiting for you to say the thing they already knew you were going to say. "I already put together the permit application," she said. "We can file on Monday." I had not fought my brother in the room. I had not screamed. I had not pleaded. I had simply made sure that every choice he made was a choice he made freely, with full access to his own recklessness, and I had let the law, and the building, and the record speak for themselves. "You wanted the space," I had thought, watching the grand opening on Lily's camera feed from my apartment. "You own everything that comes with it." Hearth Studio had its best revenue quarter in its history that summer. Lily got a raise, and a title studio director, and a key to every room in the building. The youth workshop program launched in September, with 12 kids on the first day, and a waiting list the following week. My grandmother's lopsided bowl sat on its shelf by the window, in the light that was softer and steadier than anywhere else in the house, the way it always had been. The way, I was now certain, it always would be. I didn't need to fight. I just needed to be patient enough to let them finish.